Today I'm going to talk to you about getting through weird times. Weird is a good word to describe what we're going through. For some reason that word keeps coming up in my head, my thinking, weird. I see situations that has been created because of this pandemic, decisions that have been made. It just seems weird. And I've heard that word come out of a lot of people's mouths. Matter of fact, yesterday when I got to the graveside for Ed's service, there was a young man there from Amarillo. He was with the concrete vault company for the graves, and we were talking. Fine young man. And of course, the conversation got to what we're going through, and he said, "You know, this is weird." And there was the word again, weird. And so I felt like I was onto something. This is a weird time. And we need to know how to get through it. I don't think anybody in this room has gone through anything quite like this before. I know I haven't. And I'm 42 years old. And all right, Kyle. I got a long memory. But it's just unusual. It's weird. You could use other synonyms, such as unnatural, getting through unnatural times. I don't think there's an argument in this room that this is not unnatural. Or the word unreal. The younger people seem to like that word, unreal. This getting through unreal times. Or abnormal is a great word. We could say getting through abnormal times, or freaky. I'm not real excited about that word, but it is a synonym if you look it up for weird. It's a freaky time. Spooky is another synonym. That stunned me. I wouldn't have used that word, but it says weird can be spooky. Mystifying is a good word. How to get through this mystifying time? How can we get through this weird time? The emphasis this morning is really not on weird, it's on getting through. Beloved, we will get through this. We really will. I think of Psalm 23. It says, though we walk through the valley of the shadow of death, we will fear no evil. We'll go through. And I always draw emphasis to the word shadow, because you can't have a shadow without light. And we know that God is light. Jesus is the light of the world. And so where is Jesus when we're in the middle of our weird times? He's with us. He's the light. That's where there's a shadow. I just saw Tia, and I think the word weird, it was in our conversation yesterday about the day in which we're in. I was thinking about the passage in James where the writer is dealing with Jewish believers who were going through a difficult time. I think they might be offended if we call it weird, because it's more than weird for them, because they had given their life to Christ. They had embraced Him as their Messiah. And because they were Jews, and the majority of the Jews considered Jesus a heretic, they were driven from their homes. Because they were Jews, the Gentiles would not receive them. Their own brothers, the Jews, would not receive them because they had become Christians. I'd say they're in a tough spot. How would you like to be in a world or society where you were rejected by every group? Weird. And James gives them some great counsel. These people who found themselves in a weird time. He said, consider it joy. Maybe James was on something there. Joy? in the midst of weird times, an attitude of joy? See, joy is different from happiness. Happiness is situational, circumstantial. We're happy that something is working out or in a particular way that we enjoy. But joy is something else. The Bible doesn't say that happiness is a strength. The Bible says in Nehemiah that the joy of the Lord is our strength. Joy is not situational. Joy is not based on our circumstances. It's an inner peace that comes because of our relationship, our union with Christ. He said, consider joy when you go through various trials. That jumps out at me. It didn't say if you have difficult moments, if you have some weird seasons. No, when you have weird seasons. Do you know what will happen when we get through this weird season, and we will get through? There will be other weird seasons. That will always be, because we're living in a world that was contaminated by sin. It infected the whole sphere of the natural realm. It rains on the just and the unjust. You can do the right things in life, push the right buttons, pull the right levers, and things can fall in on you. It has nothing to do with you. It's because we live in a sinful world. Consider all joy when you go through weird times. Then he says this. This is interesting. He says, knowing this. See, there's only one way. Listen carefully. This is important. There's only one way we can get through weird times. We have to know something. We have to know something. What is it James says that we have to know to get us through tough times? He says, the object of trials. Listen carefully. The object of testing is not you. It's your faith. I don't know about you, but that just gives me a little relief. That I will never be the object of a test. My faith will. When I go through weird times, I'm not the object of the weird times. My faith is. That helps me. If we understand and have the right focus, we can get through some serious stuff, folks. Now let's stop and think about this. I'm looking at people that, I'm not saying you're old, but there's some maturity in this room. I would say that you've been through some stuff. Jeff and I were talking this morning, that when you're talking with someone, you really never know what that person is going through or has gone through. And sometimes it's so easy to be judgmental and write somebody off as being whatever, and we not know their story. Tika and I was talking to a man just yesterday. And in the casual conversation, it came out that he had a brother that committed suicide years ago. I never knew that. I was kind of taken back. That's a tough gig. It's not when we go through weird moments or weird seasons. It's when. But when we go through these weird seasons, we're not the object of focus. Our faith is. Then James says something else. When you go through weird times, it gives you an opportunity to do something that you might not have the opportunity to do without the weird time. That is, mature in faith. It gives us an opportunity to mature in our faith. I know, looking at me now, it's not very obvious, but there was a time when I worked out a lot. I ran, I lifted weights, I had it all my life until last week. That's been a little more than a week. But when we work out, sometimes it doesn't feel good. It hurts. It's uncomfortable. But what we're looking for is not the pain, it's the results that comes from the pain. It makes us stronger. If you take a well-functioning arm and place it in a sling and just leave it there, it will atrophy. Without use, it will become weak. Do you know that without the exercising of our faith, we wouldn't be strong at all? Weird seasons might take us out. But it's during these weird seasons that we can gain strength. We can mature in our faith and be stronger because of it, not destroyed from it. That's what James is telling these folks. And then he wraps it up by saying, if you lack wisdom, I love that. If you lack wisdom. What is wisdom? Wisdom is seeing things from God's perspective. That's what wisdom is. He says, if you don't understand what's going on, then ask God to give you wisdom. And the beautiful thing is, we've asked God for wisdom before, we never used it. So maybe if we ask Him for wisdom this time through this weird season of pandemic, maybe He won't answer us because we did not use what we used last time. But James says, no, He won't do that. He won't do that. Matter of fact, He'll give you more than you need. See, that's the God we have. He never gives you just enough. He gives you more than you need. My cup runneth over. We wear the best robe. We eat the fattest calf. That's God's measure. He says He will give you more than you need, liberally. And then He says, and upbraideth not. In other words, He will not say to you, Jeff, I'm not going to give you insight into this because you didn't use what you asked me for last time. He'll never do that. He will allow us to see it the way He sees it. I'm telling you, I have to keep reminding myself of what I'm telling you. God is not concerned. God is not wondering what is He going to do. God has not lost control. He's still sovereign. And He's good. And He's going to get us through this. That brings us to the Hebrews passage that I want us to look at this morning. What's interesting to me is priority or biblical order. For some reason, I like that. I have an affinity toward that. I just like biblical order for some reason. And we have it right here in Hebrews chapter 11. And it'd be verses 4 through 7. I'm not going to read all the verses to you, but I am going to point out some things that are significant. I want you to look at verse 4 and look at the first person that is mentioned in this hall of faith. That's what Hebrews 11 is referred to oftentimes as the hall of faith. Not the hall of fame, but the hall of faith. People of incredible faith. Matter of fact, the same faith you have. You want to hear something staggering? The same amount of faith that you have. Moses and Abraham did not have more faith than you. You carry God's measure. And I just gave you a few glimpses of God's measure. A cup overflowing, the best robe, the fattest calf. He's able to do exceedingly abundantly beyond anything we ask or think. That's God's measure. These are called the hall of faith people. And the first one mentioned in verse 4 is who? Abel. What does it say? By faith, Abel. The currency of exchange has always been faith. In our society, we use cash money. Well, we don't do it. We use credit cards and stuff like that. But we have a currency to exchange in our economic system to acquire goods and services. We are part of the kingdom of God. And we have a currency to acquire goods and services in the spiritual realm. It's called faith, the currency of faith. And it's given to us by God. And the first one mentioned in the book of Hebrews, verse 4, is by faith, Abel. We find him in Genesis chapter 4, don't we? Abel. Who is the second one mentioned? He's found in verse 5. Enoch. And Enoch walked with God and was not, for God took him, in Genesis 5. Can you imagine that? We think about Elijah that was caught up in the presence of God. But man, long before Elijah, there was a guy named Enoch. And he walked with God. He was a walker with God. And it says he was not, in other words, he did not die. He just walked with God into God's presence. Never died, just took one step into his presence. Isn't that amazing? Enoch. There's another one mentioned in verse 7. Who's he? Noah. By faith, Noah. Don't forget how we started. Our proposition is, how do we get through weird seasons? How do we get through strange times? How do we get through uncommon situations? How do we get through? They set the pattern. It's biblical order. Let's think about Abel. If you and I were sitting down doing a study of Abel, and we were to characterize something that was significant about that young man, the word that we would deduce is the word worship. He was a giver. Giving is an expression of worthship. It's an Anglo-Saxon word, worthship, that which is of worth. Worship is simply what is important to you. What is of worth to you? Whatever it is, that's what you pay attention to. He gave his first to what? God. He was a worshiper. He was a worshiper. Now, what about Enoch that we read about in Genesis 5? If we were to study this man and as little as we know about him, I think it'd be obvious that we'd say, well, he walked with God. Well, yeah, he walked with God, was not, for God took him. He just walked into God's presence. So he's known for his walk. We talk about walk all the time in the church. Be careful about your walk. What are we talking about? We're talking about lifestyle, how we live our life, our walk. Sometimes that word is translated conversation. Our walk. Our walk needs to match our talk, and our talk needs to match our walk. They need to be in sync. Enoch was known for his walk. Noah, by faith Noah. What did he do? He built a boat. Why a boat? There had never been a rain before. There was no skiing or fishing back then from a boat. But God told him to build the ark. What did that require? Work. By faith, Noah. Work. So we have worship, walk, work. Now, the important thing is for us to see it in its priority. Because I assure you, in the church, primarily we talk about work. It's work. I'm not saying work is bad. That is not what I'm saying. But work, listen to me, should not be a priority. But we've made it number one. Work. Man, I came out of a denomination would work you to death. What's that saying? You can ride a good horse too long? If you want to go to work, just become a part of the church I pastored back then. Woo, we put you to work. Again, I'm for work. I'm not against it. I'm not opposed to it. But it must never become our number one priority. Sometimes the best thing you can do is relax. I'm going to add to that and not feel guilty. Sometimes the most constructive time spent is not working, but relaxing. And it's going to be hard to relax with somebody you don't know. It's hard to relax with someone you don't trust. Work, yes. But we don't work to become. We work because we are. It's not that we have to, we get to. What we do, the work comes out of our being, not doing in order to be. You understand what I'm saying? Work is great, but we flip the priority. And if that is our number one priority, and primarily in the community of faith, work is number one, it's going to be hard and difficult to get through this weird time without losing your mind. And some of us don't have much to lose. I'm talking about me and Dennis, okay? We shift from work to walk. You know what amazes me is that for so many years, after a service, someone would usually say to me, "Boy, preacher, you stomped on our feet today." As if that was the badge of a good message. And I just swole up, man, did my job. It was a weird day when I discovered that was my job. Do you know, I don't need to tell people what they're doing is wrong. Hello, thank you, Linda. They know. What they need to hear from me is how good our God is. And loves us in spite of what we do. Because when we understand that, we will stop doing the things we shouldn't do. It's not the opposite. What you walk. But am I saying that walking right, upright with God is not good? No, that's not what I'm saying at all. But if we make that a priority, I'll tell you, getting through weird seasons, weird times is going to be tough. It's not about walk. Then if it's not about work or walk, what's it? It's about worship. We've relegated worship to third place. I'm talking about in the community of faith, in church. We talk about work more than worship. We emphasize walk more than we do worship. And we misunderstand worship. Worship is not what we just did only. Yes, it includes singing and loving on God through word and lyrics and music and such. Yes, yes. But that's only a minuscule part. Worship, according to the book of Romans, is a person's heart that's totally surrendered to God. Do you know that I could be cleaning a commode and have my mind set on God, my thoughts set on Him, and God receives that as worship? That is my reasonable service of worship, latria. That's interesting. You could be driving your vehicle, and you're thinking about Him, your thoughts are on Him. He receives that as worship. What do you do if you can't play guitar like Jeff? What if you can't even play a cymbal? Some of us can't even play a radio on key. That's how challenged we are. What about that? Worship is worship. That which is supreme worth. That's Him. He has my life. That's number one. And when I get that in order, listen to me carefully. When I make that my number one priority, because that makes Him my number one priority, I'll have no problem with my walk. I'll have no issue with my work. Why? Because He's number one. And He's the one that will get me through weird times. Yesterday, I had an experience that, man, I felt like a third wheel. Was it a fifth wheel? Anyway, I was embarrassed. They had a Marine there that was doing the flag presentation. I was talking to these guys before, and I was pitting them against each other. One was a Marine, one was Army, one was Navy, and I was Army. And so I was picking, and they were arguing with each other. They rode together. They said, "Oh, man, we're unmerciful on each other." And I said, "Well, I'd like to ride back to Amarillo with you and just listen to you." And, yeah, come on. Well, I wasn't paying attention, and another individual walked up in uniform, had a hat on, and When I looked up, I saw him. Now there's 4. I'm going, Marine, Army, Navy. That must be Coast Guard. Because they were standing at an angle and I couldn't see the uniform. It was dark blue and had yellow stripes and hat on. So I didn't pay any attention. And when the service was over, I was still under the canopy, and I saw in the corner of my eye this individual that I thought was Coast Guard was approaching me. Tika and I was talking. And I thought, well, they're coming over to introduce themselves. When they walked up, they stuck out their hand. I shook it, and I looked right at them. And didn't recognize them. It was our fire chief, who's a member here. Sits right there. Robert Murray. I go, oh no, Robert. I'm sorry. He's, don't worry about it. You never seen him in a uniform like this. And I started looking for fire chief and all this kind of stuff. But I was embarrassed. Now listen carefully. I was so focused on the uniform, I couldn't see the face. If we're not careful, we will so be focused on this pandemic. We'll be so focused on COVID-19 that we can't see the face of God coming to us. God did not send this COVID-19. Throw that junk out the window. God is not the source or author of this, but God can take what the enemy meant to destroy us and take it and turn it around for our good and His glory. We just have to intentionally look for His face in the midst of it. Man, I feel stuff rise up in me when I hear people say, oh, God did this, and this is God's will. It is not God's will. Not the God of the new covenant. People will go to the old covenant and say, well, what about? We're under new covenant. We have a good God. And the enemy takes stuff to destroy us, and God says, I'll handle this. You keep worshiping. You keep walking upright, and you keep serving. You keep working. You look for my face in the midst of it. And I'll tell you what, you'll get through it. And when you come out on the other side, your faith will be stronger, you'll be more encouraged, and you'll be ready for the next weird season. Because it's coming. Amen? I'm so thankful God keeps it simple. Because I'm a simpleton. I've got to have it simple. It's about worship. Just think about Him. Friday, I was driving to Amarillo to take my heart monitor back, and I was having a conversation with God. And I want to tell you something. Over the years, almost 50 years of ministry, I've had some real good talks with God. I mean, real good. But I was amazed Friday. Our conversation was good. I cannot tell you how many times I was talking out loud, getting ready to ask Him a question. He had answered for it, it even came off my lip. I go, oh, that's amazing. Well, Lord, what about? And He'd answer it. And I'm thinking, why don't I talk to Him more? He has all the answers. He has more answers than Ken does. And He's always right. Not Ken, God. That's worship, folks. And I'm just like you. I can get so distracted so easily, so quickly, just by watching news media. And find myself just, and I see the uniform, I see the pandemic, I see all the stuff, but I can't see the face of God that's looking right at me and saying, son, I got this. I know this is not good. I know it's weird. But I'm going to take this weird stuff and I'm going to turn it around for your good and my glory. That's the kind of God we have. Now, here are a few takeaways this morning, and they're not elaborate, they're not strong, they're not overpowering. Weird times are inevitable, folks. It's not if we go through seasons like this, it's when. And the reason is we live in a fallen world. And as long as we're here, we will go through more. But when the undertaker comes, or the upper taker comes, it'll all be done. But in the midst of these weird seasons, we have a faithful God who can do all things. Amen? Weird times have a purpose. It's a time for us to be strengthened in our faith, become stronger, love God more, encourage one another more often. That's what it's about. Minister to people, witness, seize the opportunity, redeem the time, tell people about our good God. The third is God is faithful. Do you know that's all He can be? God can only be what He is. He's faithful. That's all He can be, is faithful. And the last takeaway is we win because God won. Yesterday, leaning up against that metal pole under the canopy at the graveside, I was watching the people as they were talking to Carlin on the iPhone. And I was thinking about the weird time. All of a sudden, I became aware of a truth. And the truth is this. If the Lord tarries, do you know all of us will have that day? I'm just telling you. And it's no respecter of age. We think 70, 70, what? No, it's no respecter of age. We're all going to have that appointment. Somebody will be speaking over us. Here's what became so impressionable in my spirit at that moment. You ready for this? You will do it alone. We think about this pandemic, how many people other than Ed have been celebrated, and loved ones couldn't be there. Loved ones could not be in the room when they took their last breath, could not touch them. Some could not even come to the graveside. And you think, what's sad? Alone? And then all of a sudden I thought, someday it'll be all of us, and you're going to do it alone. But we can do it because Jesus died alone. We talked about that last week. Could you not watch with me 1 hour? He said to the inner three, and they couldn't. Why? He had to do it alone. But when we close our eyes on this side, we won't be alone. What the world can't see is real life. The party's going. The shepherd who found the sheep that Jeff loves to preach, they had a party. The woman who found the piece of silver had a party. The father whose son came home had a party. There's some partying going on. And I was thinking, Ed had to be proud of Carl, his son, yesterday. And I thought, he might not even noticed. He was so living and having fun, he might not even